In 2023, there was a plethora of high-profile missing person cases. With these cases comes media coverage, podcasts, TV shows, and even documentaries. This influx of media brings with it theories, speculation, and new clues. But for each high-profile case, there are hundreds more that fly under the radar. Number 5. 23-year-old Allan Bryant was a young man full of promise and hope. His parents, Allan and Marie, were overjoyed when they welcomed him into the world. Shortly after, they welcomed 2 girls and instantly knew that Allan would take on the big brother protector role. By 2013, Allan was 23 and was beginning to find his footing in the world. He was slowly building his career and enjoying spending time with his friends. This would all come to a halt on November 3rd, 2013, when Allan suddenly disappeared. Not much is known about Allan's early life, other than he was raised in Glenrothes, Fife, by his parents. By 2013, Allan had reached adulthood and was living at the family home on Ednam Drive. His father, Allan Sr., described him as a kind and hard-working young man who showed a lot of potential. According to the Courier Evening Telegraph, at least 8 people are reported missing daily in Fife. Most of them are found soon after, but Allan would be that anomaly. On November 2nd, 2013, Allan got ready and rushed down the stairs of the family home at around 8 p.m. His parents recalled to police that Allan and a group of friends were heading to Leslie Golf Club, around 2.5 miles away, to attend an engagement party. Shortly before leaving at 8:30 p.m., Allan asked his mother if he looked okay and seemed excited about the night. As Allan left, Marie had no idea it would be the last time she would ever see her son. Reports indicate that Allan and his friends arrived at the golf club soon after 8:30 p.m. and spent the night drinking and celebrating. By midnight, the party had begun to die down, but Allan and his friends were not done. So they decided to call a taxi from Leslie Golf Club to Styx nightclub, which was about a 6-minute drive. Styx nightclub was also incidentally just a mile from where Allan lived, which made him feel confident about getting home. Allan and his friends continued the festivities at Styx nightclub, drinking and dancing. At 2 a.m., the nightclub closed and patrons were asked to leave. One member of staff remembers speaking to Allan at around 2 a.m. when he asked if he was okay. Allan appeared intoxicated and unsteady on his feet, but was capable of finding his way home. Allan walked off in the direction of his Ednam Drive home just a mile away and was never seen or heard from again. Hours later, Allan Sr. and Marie woke to find their son's bed empty. They began making several calls to Allan's friends, hoping to find that he'd stayed over at their house for the night, but Allan was nowhere to be found. This is when the panic began to set in for the couple. Allan Sr. made further phone calls to Allan's friends, taking down as many details about the night before as he could. Similarly, Marie went door to door along Ednam Drive and beyond, asking neighbors if they'd seen or heard anything unusual, but nobody had. Repeated calls and texts to Allan's phone remained unanswered, and his parents knew that something terrible had happened. On November 4th, 2013, they became one of the 8 daily calls made to the Fife police to report someone missing. They too hoped that Allan would walk through the door with an apology and a story to tell, but their story wouldn't work out this way. It wasn't until November 6th, 3 days since Allan had been missing, that Police Scotland made their first appeal. Allan's parents commented that the first days of the investigation, which are known to be the most vital, were ruined in their son's case. Police retraced Allan's steps and wound up at Styx nightclub. According to the Daily Mail, 2 sets of CCTV footage existed from that nightclub, but the police took several days to retrieve it. It was only after pressure from Allan's family that Police Scotland asked for the footage, but by this time it had been overwritten. Only one piece of CCTV footage remained, which showed Allan leaving Styx at 2 a.m., stumbling around without a coat. Allan's friends and family begged the police to release the footage, but Police Scotland were hesitant. Marie told the Daily Mail that, quote, the police were reluctant to release it because it showed Allan drunk. There was also another issue with the footage. It appeared that Styx nightclub had been holding a Halloween party on the evening Allan disappeared. This made it far harder for people in the tape to be recognized, as they were all in fancy dress. Weeks after the footage was discovered, the police finally released it to the public and urged anyone with information to come forward. Bits of information came through, but nothing substantial ever materialized in Allan's case. While the police were working through the case, Allan's family and friends worked tirelessly to distribute over 50,000 missing person flyers across Fife. Ponds and rivers, including the River Leven, were searched thoroughly after fears that Allan had fallen in following his night out. Despite these mass searches and the help of helicopters, no sign of Allan Bryant has ever been found. Shortly after his disappearance, a new clue came to light. Witnesses revealed that Allan may have attended nearby house parties once Styx had closed. These parties took place just a few roads away from the nightclub, but there's no solid evidence to suggest that Allan was there. For 10 years, Allan's case went cold, but a new shocking witness came forward. In December of 2023, over 10 years later, a new witness came forward claiming they heard a woman screaming hysterically between 3 a.m. and 8 a.m. on the night that Allan disappeared. The screams were reported by the witness to have been heard 5 streets away, and Police Scotland appealed for any information. As per the Daily Record, the police believe the incident took place on Barton Place, Murfield Drive, Forest Drive, and Elgin Drive. The area is a 20-minute walk from Allan's home, and also 20 minutes from Styx. Since this new statement, no further movement has been made in Allan's case. His parents continue to fight for justice for their son, and have publicly stated that they no longer believe he's alive. Marie and Allan Sr. have funded billboards and even consulted psychics in a bid to find answers. Allan Bryant is described as a white male with brown hair, blue eyes, and about 5'6". He was last seen wearing a Voy t-shirt, dark denim jeans, and gray leather shoes. Anyone with information is asked to contact 101 or email operationtoner@scotland.pnn.police.uk. Alternatively, if you wish to remain anonymous, you can contact Crime Stoppers at 0800 555 111. Number 4. Kelly Day Wilson and her family lived in the small city of Gilmer, Texas, a place they'd inhabited for many years. Those of Gilmer, Texas are incredibly proud of their small town charm and the welcoming aura. Around 5,000 people call Gilmer home, making it one of the smaller cities. With such a small population, everyone in the city knows just about everyone, and it's exceptionally safe. At least that's what residents thought. In January of 1992, the disappearance of Kelly Day Wilson would shake the city to its core and strip away the safety net of the small town feel. In early 1992, Kelly Day Wilson was well on her way to securing her future. She was in her final year at Gilmer High School and had picked up a job at Northeast Texas Video. This job gave Kelly 2 things: independence and her own money. As a result of her hard work, she could spend weekends with her family and buy all the clothes she wanted from the local mall. The new year had just rung in, and Kelly and her classmates were looking forward to their summer graduation. They wondered which colleges they would be accepted to and where their futures would take them. On January 5th, 1992, Kelly drove her 1985 Dodge Charger to Northeast Video for her usual shift. Her boss and the owner of the store, Joe David Henry, worked alongside Kelly that evening and didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. CCTV from the bank showed Kelly's car pulling up to the machine to make a deposit, but investigators have been unable to confirm if it was Kelly inside the car. At 8:30 p.m., she and Joe closed up the store for the night before parting ways. Joe was the last person to see Kelly alive and told investigators that Kelly went straight to her car and began driving to the bank around the corner. Joe would later confirm that he had sent Kelly to the bank to do the store's daily cash deposit while he drove on home. Kelly never made it home that evening, and her parents waited up all night for her return. When morning came on January 6th and there was still no sign of Kelly, her parents began to panic. Her mother immediately began calling around to her friends, but nobody had seen or heard from her. She also placed a call to Joe David Henry, the owner of the video store. During the call, she asked if Kelly had mentioned anything about her plans for that evening, but Joe maintained that she was intent on heading straight home. Morning turned to afternoon, and there was still no sign of Kelly. Distraught, her stepfather drove to Northeast Texas Video to speak to Joe directly and search for clues. When he pulled his car into the parking lot, his heart sank. There, staring back at him, was Kelly's 1985 Dodge Charger. One of the tires had been slashed, but there were no signs of a struggle. Kelly's purse was found inside the car, along with other personal items, and the only things missing were her car keys. Joe David Henry confirmed that Kelly had failed to show up for her shift that afternoon, but it's unknown whether he had noticed Kelly's car in the parking lot. Shortly after her car was abandoned, the Gilmer Police Department became actively involved in her case, labeling it as a missing person case. Joe David Henry was questioned extensively by the Gilmer Police Department, as he was the last person to see Kelly alive, but he was quickly ruled out. The next person of interest was Michael Bybee, a fellow student at Gilmer High School. During questioning, Michael admitted to slashing Kelly's tires, but insisted he had no knowledge of her disappearance, and the incident was a mere coincidence. While the timing of the slash was odd, the Gilmer Police Department was soon able to rule out Michael as a suspect. The next possible suspect in Kelly's disappearance was her boyfriend, Chris Denton. According to those who knew the couple, Chris had a wicked temper, and the pair had been arguing prior to her disappearance. In the weeks after Kelly disappeared, Chris sold his car to a buyer in Mexico. When Gilmer police were finally able to get their hands on the car, they found strands of blonde hair, the same color as Kelly's. While investigating Chris, police also considered his cousin, Brent Ward. Ward had lied to investigators of his whereabouts on the night of January 5th, but there'd never been any solid evidence to connect the two to Kelly's case. In 2004, Chris Denton passed away, and with this came rumors of a final confession, but this was soon discovered to be a malicious lie. The final suspect in Kelly's case would shock the city of Gilmer. Sergeant James York Brown of the Gilmer Police Department had initially led the investigation, but in 1994, 2 years after Kelly disappeared, he and 7 other people were indicted by a grand jury for their involvement in Kelly's disappearance. The prosecution alleged that James, along with his co-conspirators, had kidnapped Kelly and held her prisoner for a week before disposing of her. Following months of investigation and trials, the charges were dropped against James York Brown and the 7 others that were involved. Since then, there's been little movement in Kelly's case, and her family are desperate to find out what happened to her. They believe someone in Gilmer holds the answers and is asking them to come forward to put the ordeal to an end once and for all. Kelly Day Wilson is described as a white female with naturally brown hair, blue eyes, 5'7" and 120 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Lucky Bolden of the Gilmer Police Department at 903-843-5545, quoting case number 007A. Number 3. 51-year-old Michael Allan Tapley was described as a kind, warm-hearted man with a love for his family and the 40 acres of land that he owned in Snowflake, Arizona. Michael had previously been married, and the marriage had produced children. Unfortunately, Michael and his first wife, though, were not meant to be, and years later they would finalize their divorce. Following this, Michael was content living life at his own pace. But then in 2003, he met a woman who would forever change the course of his life. In early 2003, Gina Haskell had recently divorced her husband and was looking for love. While out and about in Gilbert and Snowflake, Arizona, the paths of Michael and Gina crossed. From that moment, they became infatuated with one another and began spending more and more time together. Gina soon moved to a 40-acre plot of land that Michael owned, and the two began making preparations for the rest of their lives. Around 2004 or 2005, Gina and Michael said I do, and Gina became Gina Tapley. To the outside world, their marriage seemed perfect. By 2005, Michael's children from his first marriage were adults themselves, leaving Gina and Michael to live on the plot in peace. Michael loved to ride his motorcycle and hike in nature, and the land provided plenty of space for Michael to indulge in both. Aside from Gina, Michael had another woman in his life, his beloved dog, Lady. According to friends and family, Michael worshipped his dog, and he would have done anything to protect her. While things seemed perfect from the outside, things between Michael and Gina were crumbling. The two were facing financial difficulties, which can put a huge strain on a relationship. In response to this strain, Gina threatened to harm Michael and began to physically attack him. This led to him calling the Navajo County Sheriff's Office and getting a restraining order against his wife. Days after the incident, Gina and Michael reconciled, and the order was withdrawn. Some sources state that on another occasion, Michael also got another restraining order from his wife. On February 18, 2008, the lives of Michael and Gina's families were turned upside down when they were both reported missing to the Navajo County Sheriff's Office. Colleagues of Michael's reported that they had not seen him since February 15th, when he left work for the weekend. Michael worked as a bus driver for the Snowflake School District and told his coworkers that he intended on spending the weekend in the wilderness to prepare for an upcoming hunt. When investigators were made aware of Michael's disappearance, when he failed to show up for work, they discovered that his wife Gina was also missing. This immediately struck them as odd, and a full-scale investigation began. For weeks, the Navajo County Sheriff's Department searched Snowflake high and low for any sign of the couple. There'd been no movement on their bank accounts and no contact via their phones. Then, on March 1st, 2008, something bizarre happened. Gina returned home alone and also decided to get in direct contact with Michael's family. It wasn't until March 10th, 2008 that Gina arrived at the Snowflake Taylor Police Department to make an official statement. In her statement, Gina claimed that on February 20th, 2 days after he was reported missing by his workplace, he left the home and it's unclear whether he returned. She then went on to say that in the period that the two were deemed to be missing, they were actually visiting her family in Raymore, Missouri. Following their visit, Michael instructed his wife to drop him off at a casino in Kansas City, Missouri, so he could spend the afternoon in the casinos. Michael's family would refute this, saying that Michael was not a known gambler, and it doesn't make sense that he asked to visit a casino. Gina also claimed that when she dropped Michael off, he gave her the keys to his truck and told her to drive it. This is in direct contradiction to the insurance policy on Michael's beloved 1998 Ford F-150. According to the Charlie Project, the policy states that Gina Tapley is a person who's specifically not allowed to drive the truck. A repair shop owner in Wichita, Kansas, reportedly was working on Michael's truck in February of 2008. He commented that Gina arrived at his shop alone, and that the truck's cab and bed were so full of items that there would have only been enough room for one person. Shortly after the truck was repaired, it was impounded by the police in Adrian, Missouri. Upon impounding, it was discovered that the truck's ownership had been signed over to someone else by Gina Tapley. The Charlie Project reports that on the ownership papers, Michael's name had been signed Mike Tapley. Investigators found this incredibly bizarre, as Michael had always signed legal documents as Michael A. Tapley. Following this, Gina became uncooperative with the investigation and maintains that she's telling the truth. The Navajo County Police Department and the Snowflake Police Department are both incredibly wary of Gina's story and question her involvement in her husband's disappearance. One unconfirmed source has alleged that in the weeks or months before his disappearance, Michael was preparing to divorce Gina because of their previous issues and restraining orders. Since mid-2008, there's been no movement in Michael's case, and his family is desperate to find out the truth. They believe that Michael met with foul play on or around February 18th of 2008. Michael Allan Tapley is described as a white male with brown hair, blue eyes, 5'8" to 6 foot, and 150 to 180 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact the Navajo County Sheriff's Office at 928-524-4050, quoting case number 08L01023. Number 2. December of 2007 was a joyous time for 69-year-old Marceline or Marcy Smith and her husband Palmer Smith. Each year, Marcy enjoyed hosting her children and extended family and loved nothing more than gifting presents. The joy of seeing her family excitedly unwrapping gifts she'd carefully curated for them offset the stressful days and nights that she spent preparing. Unfortunately, Marcy's family would be robbed of Christmas in 2007 when she disappeared into thin air. On December 6, 2007, Marcy left her home in Murfreesboro, Tennessee to do some Christmas shopping. According to her family, Marcy frequented Kmart, Old Time Pottery, Kroger, Stones River Mall, and Avenue Murfreesboro. Her husband, Palmer, opted to stay home and finish jobs around the house while Marcy shopped. According to Palmer, she left at around 1:30 p.m. that afternoon but never returned. When evening fell and there was no sign of Marcy at her Village Green home, Palmer began to worry. Marcy was described as reliable and would never leave home without telling someone where she was going. Palmer also had an added layer of worry, as Marcy was described as diabetic and required insulin several times a day, and followed a strict special diet to keep her condition under control. Palmer worried that without her insulin, Marcy could slip into shock and eventually a diabetic coma, which carries fatal consequences. Sensing something was very wrong and worried about his wife's health, Palmer called the Murfreesboro Police Department at around 6 p.m. on December 6th. Given the unique circumstances of Marcy's health, investigators sprung into action and began surveying the local area. Everyone in Marcy's life was questioned extensively, but nobody had seen or heard from her after she left to go Christmas shopping. Palmer worried that Marcy may have been targeted because she was carrying a large amount of cash. At first, he told investigators she may have been carrying $600, but this was quickly ratified to $10,000. Investigators searched diligently through the night, but found no sign of Marcy. Alerts were placed with local news outlets, urging anyone with information to come forward. Hospitals and clinics in the area were also questioned, but nobody matching Marcy's description had come through their doors on December 6th or 7th. Just as investigators were beginning to lose hope, they stumbled across a huge clue. In the parking lot of a Walmart on South Rutherford Boulevard, around 5 miles from Marcy's home, investigators found her champagne-colored Lincoln Navigator SUV. When investigators approached the car, they found the keys were still in the ignition, and only the passenger side door was unlocked. Officers approached the Walmart and nearby businesses to obtain any CCTV footage that was available from the previous day, and they inadvertently hit the jackpot. At 2:30 p.m., a man can be seen getting out of the driver's side of Marcy's car in the Walmart parking lot. After getting out, he removes a bright green bicycle from the car and leaves on the bike. CCTV footage confirmed that he cycled south toward Applebee's, where he disappeared from view. The identity of the man remains a mystery to this day, and investigators were unable to confirm if it was Palmer or somebody else. More bizarrely, the bike didn't even belong to Marcy. Police were later able to confirm that the bike was a women's bike, but again, the owner of which remained a complete mystery. While investigators found Marcy's car, they noticed one key thing was missing: her phone. Marcy always carried her phone in case of a medical emergency, and this meant that investigators were able to track the location of her phone. After December 6, 2007, there was no activity on the phone, but investigators were still able to track its location as it was still transmitting a signal. According to reports, the phone's signal transmitted for a few days before stopping. Thanks to data, investigators found Marcy's phone off Barfield Crescent Road, which is about 3 miles from her Village Green home, and around 9 miles in the opposite direction of the Walmart where her car was found abandoned. Her family was unable to think of a reason why Marcy would have traveled to Barfield Crescent Road. Shortly after Marcy went missing, Palmer became uncooperative with investigators and began acting strangely. Despite her case still being classified as a missing person case, Palmer purchased a coffin and a headstone for his wife just a few weeks after she disappeared. Months after his wife disappeared, Palmer was issued a restraining order by a woman who wishes to remain anonymous. She claimed that Palmer repeatedly harassed her at work and pestered her to go on a date with him. He chillingly referred to his wife, who'd only been missing for a few months, in the past tense, and didn't seem distraught about his circumstances. In December of 2008, Palmer entered the Murfreesboro Police Department with a strange sheet of paper in his hand. Up until this point, he had been uncooperative, but something had changed. Palmer claimed that he'd been sent a body map by an anonymous person who claimed to have taken Marcy's life. This map was supposed to lead the police to Marcy's body, although the police quickly disputed the validity of this map. They even commented to News Channel 5 that they believe Palmer had sent the map to himself as a way of distancing himself from the case. In June of 2009, the Murfreesboro Police Department filed charges against Palmer Smith, alleging 1 count of fabricating a vehicle as evidence and 4 counts of giving false information to the police. In 2010, Palmer was convicted on these charges and was sentenced to serve 1 year and 6 months. According to the Charlie Project, Palmer and Marcy's son, Evan Smith, testified at trial, telling the court that his father had been physically and mentally abusive towards his mother. In April of 2023, Palmer Smith passed away. Police believe he was directly involved in his wife's disappearance, but they've been unable to collect enough evidence to bring about charges. Marcy Smith is described as a white female with blonde hair, blue eyes, 5'4", and 139 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Brandy Sweeney of the Murfreesboro Police Department at 615-849-2670, quoting case number 0775396. Number 1. 49-year-old Keith Raynard had spent the majority of his life in the big city of Chicago, Illinois, where he worked as a sports reporter for a newspaper. As 50 was fast approaching, Keith wanted to take life at a slower pace and dreamed of seeing more of the country. In 1988, Keith packed his bags and moved to Silver Plume, Colorado, a charming small town that sits in the Colorado Rockies. While Silver Plume has a tiny population, it's played host to not 1 but 2 bizarre and unexplainable disappearances. In 1988, Keith had become tired of the big city life, and when the chance to move to Silver Plume, Colorado for a sabbatical arose, he took the bull by the horns. Silver Plume had a population of just 130 people in 1988, and was mostly frequented by tourists who were hiking and skiing in the Rockies. Keith had recently rented a store on Main Street, which he planned on turning into an antiques shop. After many late nights and a lot of hard work, Keith's dream had come true. To top it off, his best friend of 40 years, Ted Parker, ran the cafe across the street. Keith's business was doing well, but unfortunately not as well as he had hoped, and he even thought about throwing in the towel early on. As he began to settle into his new life, he discovered something disturbing about the shop that he now owned. Just 9 months before he arrived, the shop had been owned by Tom Young, who had run it as a bookstore. On September 7, 1987, Tom closed up shop for the day and left with his dog Gus in tow. According to locals, Tom told everyone he was going traveling for a few weeks, which is why it took weeks for his disappearance to finally be noted. With each new detail that Keith learned about the previous occupant, he fell down a rabbit hole. He quickly decided that he wanted to write a fictionalized version of events, starring a character named Guy Gypsum, who was based on Tom Young and himself. At first, Keith's interest was healthy, and his family were supportive of his creative endeavors, but things quickly took a dark turn. Keith became intertwined with the Guy Gypsum character that he had created, and his family stated that the lines between reality and fiction had long blurred in Keith's mind. He was willing to do whatever it took to live out the story, and that included tracking Tom Young's last steps. On July 31st, 1998, the story of Tom Young would take a shocking turn when his remains were discovered 1.5 miles outside of Silver Plume. This latest development had shaken Keith and had significantly changed the outcome of his novel. Just a week later, Keith too would disappear under similar yet bizarre circumstances. On August 7, 1988, Keith closed the shop early at around 2:30 p.m. He visited his friend Ted Parker and a few others around Silver Plume, telling them he intended on hiking up Pendleton Mountain. According to locals, the hike up Pendleton Mountain takes around 6 hours and covers difficult and often dangerous terrain. Keith had never made it to the top of the mountain, nor had he hiked alone. At around 4:30 p.m., he visited Ted Parker one last time, telling him that he was going to make it to the top. After this, Keith Raynard disappeared, never to be seen or heard from again. When Keith failed to return the next day, Ted Parker would become the one to report him missing. He noted to the Clear Creek County Sheriff's Office that when he, Keith, left, he was not carrying any hiking gear or supplies with him. In fact, Keith had likely only taken a single can of soda for what was expected to be a 6-hour hike. What was also of concern to investigators were the clothes that Keith was last seen in. He left for his hike wearing just a flannel shirt, blue jeans, and shoes, which would not be adequate for the dangerous hike to the top of Pendleton Mountain. Search and rescue teams from nearby counties were immediately assembled, and the search for Keith began. Volunteers and locals also joined in on the search, and they were hopeful as search and rescue teams in the area had a very high success rate. As the hours wore on, hope began to fade. The cool evening air soon crept in, and rescuers knew that without food, water, or shelter, Keith would soon perish. While search and rescue teams combed the 60-degree slope of Pendleton Mountain, the Clear Creek County Sheriff's Office decided to look for clues closer to home. Upon searching Keith's computer, they found the last entry to his unfinished book. It read, quote, "Guy Gypsum changed into his hiking boots and donned a heavy flannel shirt. He understood Tom now and his motivation. Guy closed the door, then walked off towards the lush, shadowless Colorado forest above." The intertwinement of the lives of Tom, Keith, and Guy was now very apparent to investigators, but this did little to solve the mystery of his whereabouts. His friends and family were equally puzzled by Keith's final entry. His wife, Carolyn, doesn't believe that Keith would be irresponsible enough to start a 6-hour hike at 4:30 in the afternoon, carrying minimal supplies. She also commented that it was unusual that Keith had left his camera at home, as he would often hike into the Rockies to take pictures to send back home. While investigating Keith's disappearance, investigators also learned that he had attended a party the night before and was hungover on the day of his disappearance. According to those in attendance, he spent the night speaking to a woman named Greta or Gretchen, and the two discussed visiting West Virginia. Years later, the mysterious woman was tracked down, but she claimed to have no knowledge of Keith's disappearance. Some believe that Keith Raynard was targeted, much like Tom Young. They both rented the same shop and disappeared within a year of each other. Keith had become obsessed with Tom's disappearance, and his family speculated that he may have uncovered information that someone would have rather kept hidden. Another theory is that both Tom and Keith were privy to some information that another party wanted to keep secret. Whatever the truth is, Keith's family is prepared to fight until justice prevails, and the truth is revealed. Keith Raynard is described as a white male with gray hair, blue eyes, 6 foot to 6'2", and 210 pounds. Anyone with information is asked to contact Lieutenant Steve Gramillion of the Clear Creek County Sheriff's Office at 303-679-2376, quoting case number 881400. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.